Hello and welcome to Bare Bones Part 5, and this morning has not been such a sunny morning as the previous Bare Bones excerpts. It's quite rainy today, and we have an audience because my youngest is actually off school, and he's assured me he's not going to laugh, so let's hope that he doesn't. Today we are going to dip into doing something slightly different than we did yesterday. Yesterday we did a lot of adding to those lovely backgrounds that we'd created, and today we're going to save them a little bit. And today's exercise I call a light in the middle of the woods. Now, why do I call it that? Well, part of what we've been learning with this Bare Bones experience is that to dip into a space where you can feel free to be creative and let go of those critical voices, to do that you need to really have a little bit of confidence. And I think sometimes stepping into creativity is a bit like walking through a really dark woods where you can't quite see the light, but you know it's there. You might be able to hear birds singing or waterfalls rushing. And I guess what we need in those places is we just need a little bit of hope that we're going to find our way to a piece of magic in the woods. And that's exactly what I hope Bare Bones is going to be for you. It's going to be an experience where you find that little tiny nugget of creativity hidden in the woods of your adult brain that's become overcritical and over-seeking perfectionism. So I'm not going to chat too long today. I just wanted to, as always, come in and say hello, and I'm going to see you on the table. See you soon. Bye. So as I said, today the project in our little journals that we've made is to create a woodland scene, and within that woodland scene to have a little magic place of light, or you know, something that we're going to create that looks a bit magical. And to do that, we're going to use a number of products, which again I'm going to talk you through. And again, I am going to attempt to show you the slightly less expensive way to do it. What we're not looking to do is to invest lots and lots of money into doing something at this stage until you get the hand of what it is you enjoy and what products you like to use, and then you're going to go from there. So this is our journal that we started off with. Then we've got our front page, which is with our mark making. Then we've got the page that we did yesterday, which is constructing and allowing a process to happen naturally rather than it being forced. And the page that we're going to work on today is this one. So we've got a purpley sort of splatty print on one side, and we've got a green on another. And we're going to use similar techniques to start allowing these two pieces to make sense and allowing these two different colours to make friends. So the first thing that we do, of course, is to do some mark making. So I'm going to have a look back at my front here and decide which mark makings that I want to do today. I really like these flowers. I know that we had them yesterday, didn't we? So I quite like those, and maybe some of these little circles with the circles inside them. Actually, I think that might be quite fun for today's project. So I'm going to have a go at covering my pages with some of those marks, and then I will come straight back to you. Okay, so I've got some mark making on my page now. I'm just going to zoom in and let you have a see. So you can see here we've got some little white dots, we've got those little blue flowers and the little pink swirly bits and pieces. So that is on both pages, you can see there. So that's the first stage of just helping these two pages get to know each other a little bit, helping them to coordinate. And so the second thing that we're going to do is, as before, we're going to take some paper ephemera and have it over both pages to help it attach together. And I have a huge collection of Alice in Wonderland books, which I love to use because of the, it's just a beautiful story, isn't it, the way it's been written. So I'm going to use some pages out of here. So I'm just going to have a flick through. I love this where the script is sort of like poetry. So I'm going to have one of those pages. And then I'm going to have a look through and see perhaps what else we could use. So I quite like this one. It's got the names of some of the characters here. That's quite fun as well. Okay, so we now need our gel medium. And of course the credit card, which we use just to spread this out and help these pieces to lay flat. And trust me, your cards will get thicker and thicker. Little tiny tip. Most supermarkets nowadays have a huge setup where they, at the front of some of the aisles where they have these, you don't have to pay to take one. You can always sort of, grasp one. They actually go out of date, would you believe? And I was donated a whole load of these to my barn once, which is a complete waste of plastic, isn't it? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get hold of some of these pages, these nice yellow pages. And this time round, I don't want them too big. And again, I'm going to put them on so they are either facing, the text is facing sideways or upside down. I'm not particularly going to put it facing the right way because I'm not necessarily wanting to read this afterwards. It's just sort of a bit of background. Okay, so we've got some pieces of paper stuck down now, and what I want to do is let that have a bit of a dry time, and then what we're going to do is the same technique as we did last week with using our fingertips and a matching colour for this and a matching colour for this to put some little dots on the page. So exactly the same as we started off the last piece. We'll go again, and then we'll take some paint away. So that's a little secret into what's coming next. So I'll see you once this is dry. So welcome back. Our papers are dry and the glue is at a point now where we can start playing on top of it. Again, one of the reasons why we leave it to dry properly is because if you start trying to put paint over the top of gel medium, you run the risk of your paints not really doing what you want them to do. They tend to buff and crackle or become a bit more translucent than normal, such like. So it's good practice really just to let your layers dry, and this also enables you actually to stand away from things and have a little bit of a breather or a drink or something and come back to it with fresh eyes. So I've got the two paints. I've got a pink here which really matches with this side, and I've actually gone for a blue which goes with this side. Not obviously, but here we've got a really big patch actually here, pale patch, where the blue from the splat print has come out really nicely. And the splat prints, if you go back to part 2, that's how we created these backgrounds. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put a little puddle of blue paint next to me on my board. And if you're finding me and this video first, then to sort of understand what we're doing, you might want to go back to the original. And if you're finding this because you're actually doing the whole course as a whole, lovely. Please go onto the Earthed Facebook page. The link is below. And please let me know how you get along and post up pictures. We'd love to hear from you. So I'm going to put some blue paint onto one finger, and I'm just going to use my finger, and I will zoom in so you can see what I'm doing, just to make little dots. And your finger actually is a brilliant tool for making these repeat marks. Okay, so what we're going to need to do now is let those paint splodges dry, because the next piece of work, actually, we're going to cover a lot of this with another layer of paint. But before we do that, I want to set this aside and I want to talk to you about the next part of this project, because as I said, this particular page spread is about finding the magic in the woods. And the woods is a representation of that adult brain that's become perhaps a bit overgrown and perhaps a bit full of rules and restrictions and criticisms. And we want to find the little nuggets of magic within that wood, the places where there is space, the rivers that do run, the sunlight that does get through. And so one of the things, obviously, that we need is trees, and they are actually going to be the main purpose of this whole piece, is going to be the trees. And so I want to grab for myself my journal here, and this is just a rough old journal which I've, in fact it's one from my beached retreat, which is run in Cornwall twice a year. Which is a beautiful experience. Do join the Earthed page if you want to hear about it. So I've got a few pages left over that I haven't used, and that's ideal for having a practice. So I want to talk to you about tree shapes, because you're going to kind of get in here and draw them a bit freehand. And there's so many different ways you can do this. And again, like we practiced with the mark making, it's a good idea to get a piece of paper and just have a go first. I'm going to show you how I do them, and I organise them around shapes. I certainly don't draw detailed trees, that would take forever. I draw some very simple shapes, and the first one is a cone shape. So we've got a triangle top and a curved bottom. Okay? And that's very simple, and of course then the bark comes down the bottom like so. But we're less interested in the bark because we all know how to draw barks. We're more interested in the shape of the tree. The other shape of a tree that I do, which is more of a fantasy-based tree or something that looks a bit like a topiary tree, is 3 circles on top of each other. And again, these circles can be different shapes. You know, you can do them however you want. Let's have a go on another piece of paper. So another one that I might do is a more of a Christmassy tree shape. So a sweep and then a sweep further outwards. Sweep and a sweep further outwards. And it looks a bit like an angel shape. You can, of course, do a sharp triangle as opposed to having one with a round bottom. You can have one like that. To be honest, the possibilities are endless. You could, of course, just do my circle trees with one large circle. There's nothing wrong with that either. That can be quite good fun. And certainly if you are a little bit nervous of your pencil drawings, then go for that. I would say, however, that in this particular project and in my personal experience of doing art journaling, rough little pencil etchings all over the page where you think you've made a mistake actually look incredibly beautiful. So don't give up too quickly. So I am more than likely going to return to my two favourite shapes of trees, which, as I said, is this cone and three circles with a bark at the bottom of it. That's probably what I'm going to do. But the first thing I'm going to do, of course, is let those little dots dry. And then I will be right back to you, and we're going to talk about some other products that we're going to use and how we're going to start getting our woodland going. So welcome back to our painting, and the paint is now dry, and we've got our little splodges on here which is helping our two pages coordinate. And if you can remember, yesterday when we did these splodges, we then drew some black pen around them to sort of help them pop out and stand out. However, today we're not going to do that because we're going to do some paint techniques over the top of here, and the black is likely to be quite penetrating on the page, and we don't want that to happen. So instead, we're going to use some products for the next section that I just want to talk you through. Now, if you remember, right at the beginning when we did the splat prints, I suggested to you that you invest a little tiny bit of money in buying one of these golden fluid acrylics. They really are quite a lovely product. I'll just hold that up to the camera. And the one that I'm going to use, because I want to give my trees a sort of nighttime sky, I'm going to use some fairly dark colours to give a sort of magical nighttime sky. I don't want it to be too scary, if I'm really honest. So I've got this one here, which is a ultramarine violet, a nice dark purple. And then the other products that I'm going to use are some of these artist's acrylic inks, and you can get these in various different varieties. You can get a little glass bottle like this. These tend to be this sort of cheaper variety, or you can get these ones here, which are I can't remember, Dayland and Roland, I think. These are brilliant for their thickness and their quality and their colour pigment. And so I've got a few colours of those. I've got a nice dark blue, I've got a turquoisey blue, and I've got a pink. And I'm going to show you how we use those later on. And the final thing, the final product that you're going to need is some gesso. And we're going to use this in exactly the same way as we did yesterday, which is to go round the outside of our shapes before we start painting them, just to help them really have their place in the piece. Okay, so come back to my kind of tree shapes and the repeats that I use. And remember, we're trying to create a woodland or a forest area, and then we're going to put some magic in it. And the first thing that I want to do, the sort of magic element of mine, is I want to put a moon in here somewhere. And I think probably what I'm going to do is use this area here, which is already quite white, as my moon area. So I'm going to just draw a circle here. And please don't worry about your pencil marks. They're actually going to add to the piece rather than detract from it. You'll learn that in quite a number of different ways when I'm doing my art journaling. I have quite a few little scribbledy marks over it, and the benefit of this being art journaling as opposed to a final finished art piece is that these just add texture. So I've got a circle here which is going to be my moon, and then over the whole piece I'm going to begin to draw some of my repeat pattern tree shapes, just going over what we've already got. I'm going to hold that up to the camera for you so that you can just see really clearly where those pencil lines are, and they're right over the top of all of my repeat patterns and all of the work that we did with the splat prints. There you go. Okay, so that's nice and easy. You guys can do that. And again, use your own tree design. You don't have to be the same as mine at all. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to take my gesso and I'm going to fill in my moon here with the white gesso. I'm just going to bring the camera down a little bit so you can see perhaps a bit clearer. So just filling in the moon shape, and where just check you guys can see where it's quite nice to go over some of that moon shape with tree areas, so you get this kind of you know, the moon kind of hiding behind the trees. And I'm going to put this gesso on quite thick. Now, gesso is as good for adding texture as moulding paste to begin with. You might have heard of this stuff called moulding paste that creates a lot of texture. And it's lovely, and like we've said right from the beginning, you know, get into this first before you start going and investing in lots of expensive products. So I'm just going to use the gesso and put it on really thick. It will take longer to dry because it's so thick. And again, we're going to leave it to air dry. Put it on like this, nice and thick. And this is, I guess, the bonus of buying a good quality gesso, is that you can use it quite thick to create texture. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is get just a scrap of paper, scrumple it up like that so that it's got some sharp edges, and just use that to dimple some marks on my moon. We've got the moon. Now what we're going to do is we're going to use a slightly more fluid gesso, so put a blob on your board and get your brush nice and wet, and mix some of that gesso in with the water just so it's a bit more fluid. And I'm going to use this fluid gesso just to go around the outside of our trees. Now we are going to paint on top of this gesso, and the reason why we don't just paint straight away is because I want to make sure that in the end these trees stand out. We're sort of almost carving them out of this painting that we've already made. And to do that, they're going to need a little tiny bit of a halo around them. So just now, taking your brush, painting around the outside of your trees. And where the gesso ends on these lines, just get your finger and tap it out to avoid having a hard line around them. Just a little bit of a tip. If you are going to do something like this where you're carving the shapes out of an already constructed background, just do use the gesso, even if you're going to paint black over the top of the background, because it really helps just to get them to pop out. Okay, so I'm going to let all of this dry. The gesso needs to dry nicely, the moon needs to dry. It's now nice and warm outside, so I can let that dry in the natural air, which will be brilliant. And then we'll come back and we'll continue finding the magic in the woods. So the gesso has had time to dry. The moon is still wet and will probably take a good 24 hours to dry, but I want to kind of get going with the rest of this. And actually, because we're not going to put anything on top of the moon for quite some time, we can play around it. So let's talk about what we're going to do. We're not going to make this background completely opaque with paint, and what that means is we're not going to cover up completely the background with paint so that you can't see it. It's going to show through as a layer. But we're going to paint around all of the trees so that we just see this kind of purple and the trees will start to stand out. And I'm going to do that all the way around the background and along this bottom area as well, because I want to give the impression of a kind of a bit of a magical night. So this is our first layer of paint down and done, and what you can see at the moment is that it looks rather splodgy and quite liney where we've used our brushes, don't worry about that. That will all be absolutely fine and will be part of the layers and part of the textures when we come to do the inks on the top of it, which is what we're going to go for now. So this is drying, but it doesn't necessarily need to be absolutely bone dry before you start adding ink, because the ink actually will do some nice things with the water that we create. So if you remember, I've got these Daler Rowney inks here. I've got a pink, I've got a dark blue, and I've got a turquoise blue. And what we're going to do is get a little bit messy. So I want to warn you that you're going to get ink on your fingers. If you are particularly needing to have clean hands because of a work situation or things like that, then I suggest you put some thin latex gloves on just to protect your hands. And obviously do make sure that you wash your hands after you've used any product just to get any residue off. I'm permanently covered in paint, as you can see. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to start with the turquoise one. And the ones that come in these little bottles like this have these lovely little droppers on them, which are quite useful. If you get the other type, such as this, which is the slightly cheaper product, that's absolutely fine. Just use your brush to put your brush into the ink, pick up a little bit and then spot it onto your piece. But for this, we're going to use these. And I'm just going to put some dots on my work, like so, and then use my finger to smudge them. leave that to dry. That will take, you know, a good couple of hours really, because ink is very sticky, and I want it to be not sticky when I come to do the final layer. And what we're going to do is, when it is dry, and I won't do this on camera because it's incredibly boring to watch, but when it is dry, I'm going to cover it with a full layer of clear gesso, the whole piece. And the reason is that gesso, as we've talked about before, gives a little bit of a tooth to allow paint and product and pens to adhere to your picture. And at the moment, because we've covered it in this ink, it's going to be very sticky. And so when we try and write on the top of it, some pens will work, some pens won't. And I want to be able to have the freedom to use any. So I'm going to keep that to hand. I'm going to paint a full layer of that on the top, and then I will come back to you. So the gesso has dried. Was a clear layer of gesso that I painted over the whole surface, so including the moon and everything. And as I said, the reason for using clear gesso is literally to give what we call a tooth to the work. So inks and acrylic paint tends to dry quite plastically, and to then try to write on top of it can cause problems sometimes. So I just wanted to give you a bit of a zoom in on this sky and show you how absolutely delicious it is once it all starts drying. That might be a little bit dark on there. Let's see, there, you can see it now. So you've got these lovely kind of shadows and all sorts of things in there, and we've got our lovely moon in the background that's very white. And so now we need to kind of finish the piece, give it a bit of writing so that people understand why we've done this. And just to jog your memory, the kind of metaphor of this piece is that often when you're looking for your creativity, it's a bit like finding the light in a dark woodland area. You know it's there, and you can kind of get a sense of it and a smell of it and a sound of it, but to find it is often you know, a bit of a job. So I've got a couple of things to do, and the first thing that I want to do before I do anything else is I want to give this moon a little bit of a magical quality. And what I've got here is a plain white paint and just a tiny little bit of leftover blue, very sparkly, beautiful glitter. Look at that. And these, you know, you can get very cheap on eBay. It's well worth having a little set. And so what I'm going to do with that is use my trusty board again, and I'm going to put some white paint down first, like so, and then I'm going to get my glitter and sprinkle that on top of my paint. So, now, I tell you why I'm doing this as opposed to painting it and then sprinkling it on. One thing that tends to happen if you sprinkle it and then paint it on is that you get this kind of annoying clumps. And if you do it like this, where you actually paint it and put it into the paint, I'm just going to use a little bit more there, I want it, then you're more likely to get a nice even spread of glitter. Okay, so like that. Now, another benefit of using cheaper paints is that this paint won't paint the glitter white, because obviously we don't want to do that. That would be a bit of a waste. So I'm going to go over this moon with this white paint mixed with the glitter. Like so. And then what I'm going to do is get a very watery bit of that white paint with the glitter on it, very, very watery, and just go around the outside of it. You know how the moon has this lovely glow sometimes? Just going to come around the outside of this like so, and then use my finger, our trusty finger, just to spread that out. And if you use a dry brush at this point, perhaps a slightly softer one, I think, you can also feather that out. Oop, picked up a bit of a bit from the moon there. Okay. So there, we've got our sort of moon and its glow. Okay. So let's turn our attention to the trees. And I just wanted to say a little artistic mistake. I noticed as I was drying this outside that compared to the page we've done before, I've actually done my trees up the wrong way. But you know what? I just wanted to show you that because it's hysterically funny and it's just the sort of thing that I do very often. So now what do we need? We need some pens. So I'm going to use, lean over, excuse the grey hair. I'm going to use a black Posca, another black Posca. I'm going to use my white Poscas, like so. I want a nice white gel pen to write with because this is a dark background. And what else shall we use? We might use a fine line black as well. So lots and lots of black and white. And the first thing I'm going to do is get my nice thick black Posca pen and fill in the tree trunks. Okay, so don't forget this is a nighttime picture, so they're not going to be brown, you're not going to see many details, but we might want to put a couple of little branches out, just for a bit of, you know, a bit of decoration. And the easiest way to do a branch is just a line coming out with two lines either side of it, and then the bottom end of the branch, just thicken it out a bit, so a bit like a Y. Let's take to our white Posca pen now, and let's put some shadow on the top of some of these branches. So the moon is coming from the back of these trees, and so I'm going to have more moonlight around these trees here that are closer to the moon, and these ones that are slightly further away won't have quite so much. And you can use either a line or some little dots just to kind of pick out the moonlit parts of the tree. Our trees are really starting to take shape now, and you can see, I guess what I wanted to show you is that at the moment, probably you're looking at your piece thinking, oh, these trees look really flat and boring. But as soon as we take a Posca pen to them, I want you to really notice with your own eyes what happens to your tree. So I'm going to be coming in, and you can see here, let me just show you here, where I've really kind of gone over my own line. Don't worry about that. Come slightly around it if you want to. Let me show you. So can you see? I'm actually letting that sky colour now be part of my tree. Now what I like to do, just because it's my style, is I like to have a few more lines around these bits and pieces. So I'm going to kind of have a bit of a scribble and a bit of a play while you have a watch. Okay, so where I've put those, so I've scribbled and then I've filled in some of the scribbled blobs with black pen, as you can see here. And where I've got that black around the trees, I'm now going to use my white Posca pen just to put some little dots. Or, actually, do you know what? We'll change that. We'll use pink. Let's use pink. Okay, so our piece is really coming together now, and the last thing that I want to do is to put some shadow around the moon using the black Posca, and then to also do some writing on here. And I'd like you to kind of think about what it means for you to go walking in the woods in the dark with only the moon to guide you, and have a think about that. And you know, it is scary to go in the woods in the dark and walk with the moon, but also it's quite magical. So include that into your narrative. So the shadow and the moon, just a nice clean black line separating that white moon from the glow that we put around it, and then some little tiny marks. Okay. out a little character if you wanted to stick it down there. Perhaps an animal, a wolf or something you could put down there. However, for my particular reason of doing this piece, I've come to where I want to finish it. And this is another technique, obviously, that we can add to our repertoire. So this is, whereas the piece before, which is upside down, whereas the piece before was adding to a page, this is actually carving out from a page. And it's really nice to know that the backgrounds of pieces can actually become the forefront and be really beautiful. Lettering, just to say, give it some time to find your lettering. Don't worry about how your writing looks to start off with. You notice that I wrote this out first and then I started playing with the lettering. Something that I do very often is I flatten the bottom of my letters. I tend to make the tails of my D's and my B's very long. I like putting little dots at the bottom of some of my letters. And you saw here with one of the words that I thought was quite important, I actually went around that with a black pen just to make it stand out. So I'm looking forward to seeing your woods, and I'm looking forward to hearing the quote that you find when you come to your woods. Please feel free to use mine if you want to, that's absolutely okay. But do join the Earthed page, the link is below. Let me know how you get on. Do comment on this particular video and let me know how you're doing. So tomorrow, part 6 arrives, and I've got an exciting project for us to look at then. Another step, another leap forward in letting go of that inner critic and really starting to grab hold of your confidence to just play without any fear. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow.